Hello, this is a short presentation on preparing and formatting an essay. And before submitting an essay, I think it's probably worth going through a checklist just to make sure that your essay is fulfilling all the various requirements. And I would suggest that an essay meets the following guidelines. So let's just run through these. I've got 9 points here. First of all, point number 1. Do you have a cover page with the essay title, your name and course title? I always think that an essay looks better if the actual title and the various details, such as your name and the course and various other information that you might want to provide, I think that always looks best if that is on a separate page. So I would suggest that your essay has a covering page containing all that information. The essential things obviously is the title, your name. It sounds obvious, but I frequently do get essays without the student's name. And I think it's also helpful to include which particular course and maybe even the university that you're in, because some of your lecturers, including me, might actually work at more than one institution. So sometimes it's helpful, especially if they get their essays mixed up. It's helpful to know exactly which course the essay is being submitted for. It's not always obvious. Point number 2, and this is something that I've been known to forget, your essay should have page numbers for a variety of reasons. If it's printed, then obviously your essay might become loose and the page is in the wrong order. So it's obviously useful for whoever is grading the paper to be able to see clearly what order the pages should be in, even if it is even if it is an electronic version, though. Again, I would strongly suggest that there are page numbers. Not least, it might be the case that when you are getting feedback, whoever's grading your essay might want to identify a specific place in the essay, and obviously page numbers would make that process rather easier. Another thing I would suggest, lines should be 1.5 spaced. We'll come back to that in a moment. I say at least maybe double spaced, but there should be a clear gap. Again, several reasons for that. One, it makes your essay easier to read. So whoever is having to read your essay, that will make it rather easier. Secondly, if the person who's grading the essay wants to annotate, that is to say, write things on your essay, it's useful if there is a sort of gap between the lines of the text. So sort of insert comments, criticisms, corrections, things like that. Point number 5 is the text justified. If you're not familiar with that term, I will come back to that in a moment. Number 6, is your essay appropriately referenced? So does it contain enough references? Is it presented in the correct format? So if you're using the Harvard referencing system or footnotes, do your references contain all the necessary information? Added to that, this is point number 8, so I'll quickly skip over 7. Do you have a clear bibliography properly formatted at the end of the essay? Number 7, do your references contain page numbers? Again, this is something I often see students providing me with, that their essays may contain references, but they don't actually contain the specific page numbers from whichever book or article they are getting the information from. It's really important that just simply mentioning a book without saying quite explicitly where in the book you've got the information, that's not enough. So you should always include page numbers. Again, not least, sometimes whoever's grading your paper might want to go back and look at, I've certainly done this in the past. If perhaps a student has mentioned an article that I'm not familiar with, and I want to I want to look at myself, or they mentioned some surprising piece of information which they claim to have got from a particular publication. Again, I've been known to sort of check and to see exactly what the author was saying. So yeah, page numbers are important. Bibliography we just mentioned. And number 9, have you cited enough academic literature in your essay? As we've talked about at some length, web pages and stuff like that, that really is not enough. You know, a series of URL links, that, you know, that does not make a proper bibliography. So your bibliography should contain several. In fact, the bulk of your bibliography should be composed of academic books and peer-reviewed journal articles. So with this in mind, I thought we would start going through the process of producing an essay. Obviously, I'm not going to write an essay from beginning to end, but we'll make a start, and I will try and use this as an example to think about, in particular, how we should go about formatting an essay. Now, one thing I always say to my students is that you should treat an essay in a similar way to a job application, where you are either handing in an application form with a covering letter or a CV with a covering letter. And what I mean by that is that, first of all, an essay should actually look nice. So just as we would want a CV to look pleasing to the eyes, when an employer, you know, opens an envelope and glances at the CV, you know, they want to see everything nicely presented. You don't want to see any obvious spelling mistakes or things like that. Similarly, with an essay, again, it's important that, as I say, it looks nice, it's well presented, and again, you know, it should, obviously, you want to avoid any obvious mistakes. Now, I think presentation is important because whoever is going to be grading your essay, they are human, so they have all the sort of subjective biases that people have. And obviously, the way that your essay is presented isn't going to be necessarily decisive when it comes to whatever grade you are going to get. So, in other words, if you present an immaculate essay, which looks beautiful, if the actual content is rubbish, you are obviously still going to come away with a bad grade. However, I do think it perhaps makes a difference on the margins. And you could certainly envisage a scenario where perhaps your essay is sort of borderline between two grades. And you could envisage a scenario whereby a lecturer is sort of humming and hawing, you know, do I give this, whatever, 4, 4.5, depending on whatever grading system we're using. And perhaps, you know, if it is well presented, they might just lean slightly in your favor. Conversely, if it is poorly presented, they might come the other way. And as I say, that's because, you know, lecturers are human and we do have biases and whatever. And obviously, if your essay is well presented, you are probably going to be slightly more amenable. You're more likely to give the student the benefit of the doubt. Whereas if the essay is an absolute mess and your lecturer is struggling to read through it, then they will probably be more inclined to take a rather tougher view of the content. So I think it can make a difference. As I say, obviously, if if the content isn't good, then it doesn't matter how well you present your essay. It's probably not going to make much of a difference. But as I say, you can certainly think, when there is a fine line, perhaps between whether between two different grades, then perhaps the way that it is presented might actually make a little bit of a difference. So with that in mind, let's go through some of the different stages. So point number 1 is that we should have a cover page, and it should contain our essay title, our name, and perhaps the course title. So as an example, I am going to use this. This is a question that I have given some of my students for one of my courses on democracy promotion. This is an essay title I've given in the past. Can foreign aid be used as an instrument of democracy promotion when dealing with the developing world? And as I say, we want to have a cover page, and the first thing that we need on the cover page is the title. This is the question, so this is the title. But I think we can, and I'm just going to zoom out slightly so we can see a bit more of the actual page. I think we can do one or two things to make this look more pleasing to the eye. Let's first of all bring the title down a bit, so we will just put in a couple of spaces there. I should say I've got the paragraph formatting, but I can get rid of that for a moment. I think the formatting is actually quite useful, as it gives you a sort of indication of where paragraphs and spaces and things like that are. So I generally have it on. I'm going to just turn it off for a moment. Next, I would suggest we actually make the title slightly larger. So I'll just double click to take the paragraph, and we will increase the font. And depending, let's make it 26. We will also bold it, and I've suggested that if we are printing an essay out, so we're going to submit a hard copy, Times New Roman is probably the safest option. So let's switch it to that. If it's electronic, then maybe something like Arial, but Times New Roman. I think basically, if it's for a written piece of work, I would probably recommend Times New Roman, regardless of whether it was a hard copy or you're submitting an electronic version. And I am going to also center this. I don't have that option there, so I will just go to the ribbon and select the option, Control E as well. We'll get you there on Microsoft Word, and there we are. Okay, so that is our title. We obviously need to include our name, so I'm going to switch back to the left hand side, and I'm just going to type my name. And I'm going to make that a slightly smaller actual normal. Let's go for a 16. That's probably okay. Slightly smaller. Christopher Reeves. Course Democracy Promotion. Spell that right, yes. And we'll include, oops, I can't spell today. Jagiellonian University. International Relations and Area Studies, or ERAS. Okay, I think that would do. I'm going to make these that little bit single spaced. You can just put in Control 1, or you can go into a paragraph, or I'm sure there's an option here. I think is that, yeah, line and paragraph spacing. So we'll select number 1. So that will bring these together. I think the paragraph has also got a gap between them, so we'll bring that. So yeah, we'll bunch that together like that. Okay, so we now have a cover page. And I am now going to put in a page break. You can insert that. Probably the easiest way is just to press Control and Enter on Microsoft Word, if that's the software program you're using. And we are now at the beginning of a second page. Right, I don't want 2 pages on the screen, so I'm going to zoom in a bit. And we're back there. Okay, let's go back to our checklist. Number 2, does the essay have page numbers? Is the question I ask. At the moment, our essay does not have page numbers, so we should insert some. Okay, I'm going to put on our formatting back on for a moment. There we are. That shows us that we're on a new paragraph. There's no more paragraphs below us at the moment. And we're going to insert our page numbers. Okay, so we go to insert. Took me a moment to find it, but I eventually did. Page number, add page number, which is just here. Let us click on that, and we have various options. We can have it at top of the page, bottom of the page, in the margins, etc., etc. I generally, this is a matter of personal preference now. My own preference is bottom middle, which is what I am going to select here. It probably doesn't matter exactly where, whether it's at the top or the bottom. As I say though, I am going to put our page numbers there. So our document now is now going to have the right page numbers within it, which is good. Okay, let's go back to our checklist, and point number 3, are the lines of your text at least 1.5 spaced? Point number 4, is the first line of your paragraph indented and stroke, or is there a clear gap between each paragraph? And is the text justified? So I think we will take all 3 of these in one go. Let's return to our document. And let's start writing our introduction. Okay, I'm going to remind myself, what is the question? Can foreign aid be used as an instrument of democracy promotion when dealing with the developing world? Okay, so we should introduce the essay. And I'm going to write a very, very basic introduction. But just to remind ourselves, the introduction, above all else, the introduction should contain some kind of thesis statement. So it should give an indication of the line of argument that the essay is going to adopt. And it should give an indication also of the actual structure of the essay. So exactly how the essay is going to be organized. Let's write a couple of sentences just to probably, as I say, this is pretty much off the top of my head, so it's not going to be perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but really my intention today is just to think about the formatting rather than the actual content of the essay itself. Okay. Okay, first of all, we need to adjust our font because we're still in the same font as the cover page. Right, for the actual normal text within the essay itself, I would suggest we use font number 12, and we want to unbold our text. There we are, that's better. This essay will consider consider whether foreign aid is an effective tool for democracy promotion. It will be broadly argued that foreign aid, as I said, this is me now just ad-libbing. This is not me giving much consideration as to exactly what I am writing. Southern Africa, let's go with that. Okay, right, okay, so that's our first very, as I say, very rough and ready introduction. We'll write another paragraph before we start thinking about how this should be formatted properly. Second paragraph, which I will write now. Okay, I've just written a second paragraph as well. Again, this is very rough and ready. I don't not want to worry too much about the content of the essay, but rather we're more concerned with the formatting. Okay, we've got two separate paragraphs here. So the first thing we mentioned was the actual font. So in terms of size of font, I suggested we wanted size 12, which is what we have, I believe. So we've got Times New Roman 12. The text, for some reason, is still bolded. I mentioned. I thought it still looked rather black and rather thick. So we should unbold that. That looks much better. However, the paragraphs themselves are still not really properly formatted, and there's a couple of things we need to do. First of all, I mentioned in our checklist, the text should be justified. Now, what we mean by that is if we look at the right-hand side of the page, we can see the text is very sort of irregular. So it's sort of, you get this sort of squiggly outline on the right-hand side, which looks a little bit messy. That is easily fixed if we select both paragraphs. I was going to do a Control Alt, but that will also select the cover page. So I will just select these two paragraphs manually. If you want to justify, if you want to use the shortcut on Microsoft Word, you can just press Control J together. That will justify your text. If you want to do it more manually, we go to these tabs here on the home, on our ribbon, and these give us the various options of how the text should be aligned. So we've got left, center, right, and here we have justify. As I say, for shortcut, Control J. Let's select that, and hey presto, we've got two nice straight lines, and that makes the paragraphs rather more pleasant to look at and easier to read. Okay, a couple of other things we need to do. We need to make sure that the paragraphs themselves are clearly separated so that the reader knows can see clearly where one paragraph ends and another begins. There's a couple of ways we do that. One, we can make sure there's a space between each paragraph, and at the moment we seem to have one. Let's just select this paragraph. I'm going to right click so the menu comes up. We'll select paragraph there. And it's telling me at the moment that we've got a 12 gap, which is about right. If that wasn't there, then obviously the paragraphs sort of merge together. You can just about tell that there is a difference if I just get rid of the formatting as well, just because that sort of makes it clear. But if it wasn't there, you can just about clear because we have this little space here where it ends. But it could be clearer. And one way of making sure that the reader can see easily, as I say, where one paragraph ends and another begins, is to separate the two chunks of text by putting in a space. We can make the space, if necessary, even larger, just to make it clearer. So then 18, yeah, that perhaps makes it even better. The other thing I tend to do, though, is indent the first line of the next paragraph. Generally speaking, I don't do it right at the beginning of the essay or after a subheading, but all the other paragraphs, so if there was a third paragraph, which I don't have at the moment, but if there was a third paragraph as well, I would indent that. Let's just do that. I'll just write a quick sentence. Okay, we now got the beginnings anyway of the third paragraph, so the first sentence of the third paragraph. Incidentally, just on paragraphs, I would say each paragraph probably ought to have about 5 or 6 sentences, or maybe 4 or 5 sentences. I would say minimum of 4. So you don't want to, so these are actually quite short, so probably if I was writing this properly, I would want to have at least one more sentence in the first paragraph, again maybe another in the second, and again, as I said, probably about 5 or 6 sentences per paragraph. So you don't want the paragraphs too long, so you don't want them going over, for a page or a page and a half. Equally though, you don't want them too short, so because that makes the text look too fragmented. So ideally, as I say, probably we ought to be looking, as I say, for about 5 or 6 sentences per paragraph. Okay, as I say, we've got a nice gap between each paragraph at the moment, so it's reasonably clear, as I say, where one paragraph ends and another begins. But one other thing we can do, as I said before, is to indent them. So I'm going to just select these 2. I'm not going to indent the first because that's right at the beginning of the essay. But as I say, all subsequent paragraphs I would indent unless we put in some subheadings. If there's a subheading, again, generally I don't indent a paragraph immediately after a subheading. But apart from that, I generally do indent my paragraphs. So again, I'm going to right click, or we can just go up to the home again and select paragraph. That's generally how I do it. And if this little box comes up, go to special, first line. By default, it comes up to 1.27, which is generally what I use, but we can alter that if we want. 1.3, 1.4. I'm going to leave it at 1.2. Actually, it was 1.27 originally, so let's round it up to 1.3. That's fine. Click, and now our paragraphs are indented. And again, that makes it even clearer. I'm just going to zoom out slightly so we can see all 3 there. Again, it makes it obvious now that we've got 3 separate paragraphs. Okay, so just to sum up what we've done so far, we have justified the text, selected our font, and made a clear gap, and we've spaced our lines to 1.5. As I said before, again, I will just quickly select the text here. We could, where is that? Generally I go into the paragraph to do this sort of thing, so it's probably going to be easier to do it. Yeah, we've got our line spacing at 1.5. We could move it up to double, so double space it. And again, that sometimes makes it easier for for whoever's grading your essay to annotate it and insert comments, especially if they're writing on a hard copy. Okay, back to our checklist. Number 6, does our essay contain enough references, either in text or footnotes? So we need to have references. Our references need to have page numbers, and there should be a bibliography, so a list of publications right at the end of the essay, and the references should be predominantly made up of academic literature, which basically means academic books or academic journal articles. And at the moment, our essay contains no references whatsoever, so I'm pretty sure, were I to kind of continue writing and come up with another 1,000 words or so, and then submit it, it would automatically fail because there are no references in it. We have mentioned a couple of people. So we've mentioned Brown here, Sorensen as well. Obviously, if we are referring to authors, then automatically there should be a reference. So we are going to find the actual references and we are going to include them in the bibliography. Let's deal with Brown first. He's going to be pretty straightforward because this actually is a journal article. This article actually appears on the reading list for my course. So obviously when you're writing an essay, in all probability, whoever is teaching the course will give you a list of literature and you will probably want to consult and use the literature which has been recommended. You might, of course, also find some additional literature yourself, but I think it's always a good idea to actually use the publications that that your lecturers are actually recommending. So we're going to find Brown. So this is Google Scholar. So if we need to find the full reference ourselves, we can always go to Google Scholar. The keywords in the title, according to the reading list I sent out, is the author's name, obviously Brown. And the keywords of the title, it was Foreign Aid and Democracy Promotion. And there it is, Foreign Aid Democracy Promotion, Lessons from Africa. It's in the European Journal of Development Research. Says it's on Springer, which is an academic database, so it's almost certainly a proper bona fide peer-reviewed article. And if we are just trying to dig out the citation, we can click on those little inverted commas there. And hey presto, here comes the full reference in various different formats. We will use the Harvard, so we can just click on that. The reference is highlighted. I will just copy that, Control C, and we will return to our essay. Let's just write, oops. Put in bold, bibliography. We might actually want this on a separate page, thinking about it. Bibliography, and below that we can just copy and paste, and there is the reference. Because we copied and pasted it from Google Scholar, the actual font is different from the font that we have been using. So again, just for the sake of consistency and making the essay look reasonably pleasant to look at, we will put it in the same font as the actual rest of the text. In fact, there is nothing more annoying, at least for me, speaking for me, is to have an essay which is sort of mixed in terms of the font. And it's often a pretty good indication that students have sort of copied and pasted from web pages or whatever when the font does seem to suddenly dramatically change for no apparent reason. We've got 2005 again, depending on how we want to do it, we might choose to put the 2005 in brackets. Because we've got brackets, I'm going to get rid of the comma in the following space. I would also recommend putting inverted commas around the title. I would generally put a comma after that. The European Journal. Again, sometimes Google Scholar isn't great because the formatting isn't always perfect. I would suggest journals should be capitalized. I'm not sure why the 17 needs to be in italics. The rest though, I mean the basic information, again I would also capitalize the title. So the main words in the title. You don't need to capitalize, I would capitalize 8 though. You don't need to capitalize and or from, so these sort of linking words, it's unnecessary, but the keywords in the title probably ought to be capitalized as well. There we are. Oops, I was going to save that, but won't bother for the moment. Let's go and find our next reference. Now the second one is a bit more difficult to find because this isn't a journal article, but rather a chapter in an edited book. But it did appear on Google Scholar, at least the book did, but I've gone into Google Books as well, and there it is. I put Sorensen Impasse Democracy Promotion, which are 3 keywords from the title. It's telling me that we can find this in this book here, and if we click on Google Books, I'll get rid of that. That will probably give us, since we have reached the bit of the book that is unavailable for viewing, but if we go to the beginning, it will probably give us enough information about the actual publication itself. And it will probably also, I think the contents page is usually available. There we are. High stakes, low intensity democracy, understanding. And the publication details are available here as well. So we've got the title, the publisher, all the rest of it. So unfortunately, I can't do a straight copy and paste for this one. So I'm going to have to put in the whole reference manually. So I will do that. Okay, just put in the reference. As I said, this is from an edited book, so it's important in our bibliography that when we're citing from an edited book, that first of all, it contains the name of the author of the chapter. That should come first. Okay, so as I say, an edited book is composed of several chapters, usually written by different authors. This chapter has been written by Sorensen, so we have Sorensen. His initial, he's called George, but in the Harvard system, they generally just want an initial, so G. In brackets, we've got the year of the publication, so that's when the book was published. The title of the chapter, the Impasse of Third World Democracy Africa Revisited, okay, and then we have the full reference of the book. So the book comes afterwards. A mistake students often make is just to cite the edited book and not the specific chapter which they've taken it from. So always make sure that you cite the chapter and you make it clear the author of the chapter. So in this case, Sorensen. Then there's 3 editors there. So we've got M. Cox, J. Ikenbury, T. Inoguchi, if that's how you pronounce his name. It's a Japanese fellow. In brackets, we put eds. That makes it clear that these are editors. They're not authors themselves, at least not for the whole book. And then the title of the book, American Democracy Promotion, Impulses, Strategies, Impacts. The place of publication, because it's a book and not a journal article, we now need to make it clear where it was published, the publisher, Oxford University Press, and just to be on the safe side, we will include the page numbers in the book of the actual chapter. Okay, so this is the bibliography. Obviously, normally in a we just got 2 publications here. Obviously, depending on the length of the essay, that will determine the length of the bibliography. Assuming it's about 5 or 6 pages of essay, I would say we probably want at least 5 or 6 academic publications. At the moment, we've only got 2, so we'd have to insert a few more there. Obviously, we've discussed this before, but a bibliography should be in alphabetical order. At the moment, it's fine because we've got Brown first, Sorensen in second. If we come across somebody called Jones, for instance, then they would have to be inserted in the middle. The other thing, generally with the bibliography, what I tend to do is, first of all, although the text in the essay is double spaced, a bibliography I tend to just do single spaced. So let's do that. Okay. But we want to make sure that there is a space between each publication. So again, we want to make it clear where one publication ends and another begins, similar to paragraphs. And again, similar to paragraphs, I tend to indent, again, just to make it clear the differences, except, and this is the key difference, whereas in normal paragraphs we indent the first line, in a bibliography I tend to leave it hanging. So I select hanging like this. I'll leave the default setting 1.27 centimeters. We'll click OK, and that basically means that the first line sort of sticks out a bit and the rest is indented, if that makes sense. So we can see in Sorensen, that name is sort of sticking out there, and then the rest of it, following two lines, are indented. And again, that just makes it a little bit clearer. When you're scanning through the bibliography, it's easy to see who the authors are. We've got Brown sticking out, Sorensen sticking out. And as I say, a gap as well I tend to leave, and that again just makes it nice and clear where one publication ends and another begins. Okay, so we've got our bibliography. As I said, normally it would be significantly longer than just 2. I could quickly copy and paste a few more in, but I'm not going to bother. However, a bibliography is great, but it's not enough. We need also to have some references in our essay. Let's assume we are going to be using the Harvard system. So that's an in-text referencing system, sometimes referred to as author date. We've got the full bibliographic references for these publications. However, we need to actually have references in the essay. The beginning is just a broad introduction. We're not really referring explicitly to any literature here, so I don't think we're going to worry too much about inserting any references in the first paragraph. Let's go on though. It says here, several writers have debated whether using foreign aid as a tool to promote democracy is either morally acceptable or politically effective. Now we might want to put in a reference here because we said several writers, so we might want to actually mention who we actually mean here. Possibly we'd want to reference it. We definitely need one here though. Okay, so for example, so now we're sort of making it more concrete in the second sentence. Brown, so we mentioned Brown, he appears in our bibliography. And what we can do here, because we're mentioning Brown actually in the sentence, we can actually put in the year of publication here. I've already forgotten what it was. Scroll back down again. 2005. Okay, fine. So we put in 2005. So that sort of makes it clear which publication. So for example, we could, perhaps Brown has, in fact he almost certainly has, written several publications on this particular area. It may well be that he appears several times in the bibliography. So the year of publication is important for making it clear as to exactly which publication we're talking about. Conversely, Brown is a common name, so maybe there are 4 or 5 Browns appearing in our bibliography. Again, we would want to make it clear. So year of publication just makes that clear. So Brown 2005 was questioning effective, and we might want to actually include a specific page number there where he actually says this. I'm going to make this up because I'm not going to go through the article itself, but let's try and keep it fairly realistic. So the article itself is from pages 179 to 98, so let's say it's page 185. Or no, let's make it more than one page. Okay, if it's more than one page, then we put in pp dot, we're getting very technical now, 185 to 86. Okay, so it's 2 pages we're citing here. Generally speaking, if it's 3 numbers, let's say, so like page 180, oh sorry, I should be, let's type that 185 to 186. Usually if it's something like that, we would just put the 86 rather than 186. Okay. We just sort of drop the 1 here. Okay. As I say, this is an entirely sort of fictitious. I don't know whether he does actually say that these particular pages. Almost certainly not. Let's move on. Sorensen, again, we're mentioning a specific author here. So again, we'll put that in brackets. Again, we need to include the year of publication, which was 2000. Oops, I'm losing it. There we are. And again, we will include a page. Let's say it's a single page this time. So just 1p, and let's say it's page 300. We'll make it simple. Again, as I say, this is me making this up. But we've got the, again, year of publication and the page in brackets straight after the author's name. If we don't actually mention the author explicitly in the sentence, so let's say we've got several writers have debated whether using in that scenario, let's say Brown, let's say C. Brown, 2005, pages, whatever it was, 190 to 91, and we'll put a semicolon there, and Sorensen, he's got a funny Scandinavian type O in there, so I'm just going to copy and paste rather than try and find insert the right character. 2000, page 301, which again is another perfectly sort of acceptable way of doing it. So as I say, if you're not explicitly referring to a particular writer in the sentence, you can just insert the full reference that way. Just noticed democracy is not being spelled properly. We can correct that, right click it, and the joys of using the spell check. So there's no excuse really for misspellings in this day and age. We can correct it. Okay, so that sort of gives us a general idea. The alternative, rather than using in-text references, you might choose instead to use a footnote. I would say be consistent though, so use one referencing system or the other, so don't mix up footnotes with Harvard or whatever, which again I sometimes see. I am not going to sort of delete all the references now, but I will just give you a quick indication of how you might go about inserting a footnote. If you're using the English keyboard on Microsoft Word, you can simply press Control Alt and F, and that will insert a footnote, or you can go into References, Insert Footnote, and there we are, we've got a footnote. A little number just pops up right next to the end of the sentence, and then right at the bottom of the page, our cursor is flashing away, and we can put in the bibliographic reference. Usually in a footnote you would include the author. Well, if it's the first time you are referring to an author, you will paste in, you can copy and paste the whole reference. We'll do that. Except because it's a footnote. Actually, that's not ideal because hang on a minute, I'll do that again. I'll try and not get the is it going to let me do this? Yeah, that's better. Okay, I didn't want it indented. And because it's in the footnotes, we want the font smaller. So usually the text in the actual footnote will be smaller than the text in the actual essay itself. Let's just move that down to 10. That will make it look better. And in a footnote, generally speaking, in fact always, not generally speaking, we'll have the S at the beginning, which is in the wrong font. Again, we want to be consistent with our fonts and stuff, so let's just change that. That's better. And because it's no longer Harvard referencing, Usually when it's like this, the publication will appear at the end. And if we're referring to a specific page, okay, so we've got the full bibliographic reference. If we've got our footnote there, if we are referring to Brown again, if it's immediately after, so in other words, we've got S. Brown in footnote number 1, we're going to refer to him again. You don't need to write out the whole reference. It's simply enough just to put in ibid dot, and then if it's a different page number, we can put in that. If, however, let's say instead of Brown, we are going to do Sorensen. Let's just do him first. Again, we put in the full reference. This time, Word seems to put it in the right sized font. We'll just change that. The G, though, of course, has to be in Arial 2000. Can come at the end there, so it doesn't need to be in brackets because it's already in brackets. Okay, let's turn the G into times. Okay, I think that's all right. Page, whatever the page was, let's say page. Okay, let's say we've got Brown here, Sorensen in the next. We want to mention Brown in a third footnote. Brown has raised some important questions about the utility as a tool for promoting democracy. I know this doesn't make much sense, but it doesn't matter. Again, we'll insert a reference. We don't need to, because we've already mentioned Brown earlier, we don't need to put in the full reference again. It's simply enough just to write Brown. Again, we're back to Arial in our footnotes, which is annoying, but anyway, not to worry. And then just a couple of key words from the title. Again, that just helps us make it clear exactly which publication we're referring to. So let's say Foreign Aid and Democracy Promotion. And then the page numbers. That's enough. Okay, so you don't need to repeat the full bibliographical reference. So we can just put in a page number. Let's put in page number 175. Let's put it into, again, just for trying to keep it consistent. I'll stick it back into Times New Roman. So as I say, we don't need to do that. And it's getting a sense that, yeah, that I'm not sure the brown, because I copied and pasted, but it was in the same color as everything else. Right, so we can do it simply like that. One other thing, if you referring directly, so let's say there's another sentence in a study on foreign aid on Nigeria, so to Nigeria, he has argued that aid, again I'm making this up now, I can't remember exactly what he says in his article, it's been a while since I've read it, I need to check my notes, so this is entirely fictitious, so don't cite me on this. Nigeria, he has argued that aid contributed to an increase in corruption. He almost certainly has not said that, but let's just put that in. Just by way, we insert another footnote. We're still talking about Brown, which we mentioned in the previous footnote, and because of that, again, we don't even need to put in a sort of truncated version. All we need to do is ibid, which makes it clear that we are referring we are still referring to the previous. And again, if we're kind of continuing with Brown in a fifth footnote, again, we can just repeat ibid. Put a comma after that. We can, if the page number is different, then we can just put a p dot. So let's say it's 176 this time. And there we are. Simple as that. So that's basically how we would organize footnotes. Okay, so slightly differently from the Harvard referencing system. As with the Harvard referencing system, though, you would still need to put in a bibliography. And again, bibliography, if it's a sort of medium-sized essay, you'd probably want about 5 or 6 publications, academic publications. Okay, hopefully that went on for rather longer than I had intended, but hopefully that gives you an indication of how we might go about formatting and organizing an essay.